And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us on this Friday night. I know you guys have a lot of options out there. A lot of great baseball out there. Aaron Judge called back up, recalled from injury anyway. We'll see when he actually takes the field anyway. I believe the game right now is in a weather delay between the Baltimore Orioles and New York Yankees. But we saw a few trades today. Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly go to the LA Dodgers in exchange for a prospect or two. And then the Chicago White Sox send Kendall Graveman to the Houston Astros for Corey Lee. Now, a little bit of housekeeping here on the trades the White Sox have been making. It seems like they're trying to get players at least back to their former clubs, or at least that seems to be the clubs that are going for the players that are on the White Sox roster. They've shipped out quite a few pitchers already here at the deadline, and they still have more pieces to move. Now, we thought they might be one of the more active teams here at the deadline, and so far they have definitely been one of the most active teams. We still have a lot of other teams out there that still have a ton of moves that they have yet to make. The St. Louis Cardinals spring to mind. Saw some rumors today about Jordan Hicks. The deadline basically passing for what the St. Louis Cardinals at least believe to be able to get an extension done. So it seems like a trade seems to be at least inevitable at this point. There's always, the last-ditch Hail Mary. Maybe they can get something done, but it seems like Hicks will likely be moved by the St. Louis Cardinals. The Texas Rangers were mentioned today as the lead team for him, aggressively trying to pursue him. The Rangers are pursuing pretty much everything on the market right now. We hear a whole bunch of reporters right now talking about them in on literally everything right now on the market. For those of you who are Rangers fans, that's got to be music to your ears after the struggles they've had the last several years. But they're in the sweepstakes for Justin Verlander. They're in there for Bednar. They're in there for Hader. They're in there for Hicks. Any starting pitching, any relief option out there, they have had their hands in that cookie jar. The David Robertson trade that went to the Miami Marlins, they were right there even in the final hours of that deal trying to get David Robertson. So we'll see what ultimately the Rangers are able to get here at the deadline, but no shortage of activity we should see from the Rangers over the next few days. As far as the first trade that we saw today between the Dodgers and the White Sox, they get Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly. Joe Kelly, of course, had already been a member of the LA Dodgers. Lance Lynn waived his no trade to go to the Dodgers. He has one of the league's worst ERA right now, at least in the American League. They also have to be concerned about his home run numbers. Now, I'm sure the Dodgers analytics department is basically just salivating at having a pitcher like Lance Lynn come in, get him right, and get him at least back to what he's capable of doing, and they should really have a nice rotation going forward. I think this really kind of lengthens them out, gives them some options going into the second half of the year here, finishing out the season anyway, allows them not to have to rush guys back from injury, allows them to kind of put some guys in there with extra rest if they need it. Very good trade for them overall. This also gives them another great bullpen piece. Joe Kelly, while he's had an up-and-down year for the White Sox, still shows to be that high-leverage type of pitcher that you can trust in those types of innings. No matter what the situation, he's not going to be rattled because of a bases-loaded jam in the 8th inning. He's going to be somebody who's been there, done that, and is not going to make the mistake of throwing the ball to the backstop and allowing a run to score easily. So we'll see what ultimately happens for the Dodgers the rest of the way. They are said to also be interested in bringing in Nolan Arenado. They seem to be willing to do pretty much anything outside of really add-on major salary. So that's kind of the one caveat with the Nolan Arenado sweepstakes, is that they may be able to get that deal done and still stay underneath the tax number that they need to, so that way it resets their tax threshold for next offseason, or at least this offseason, when they go after Shohei Ohtani. That's the reason why they didn't retain Trey Turner and all the other guys they've let go over the last couple of years. They wanted to trim down that payroll and reset that tax clock. So keep your eyes peeled for what the Dodgers may ultimately do. I think they still got at least one more trade in them. Am I expecting it to be a Nolan Arenado trade? No, I am not. Before the news came out that Nolan Arenado would waive his no trade to go to the LA Dodgers, I would put the trade possibilities at 0.001%. Now, after that, still significantly higher at 1%. Not exactly great odds, but better than they were, say, 24, 48 hours ago. We'll see what ultimately happens. The second trade of the day sent Kendall Graveman to the Houston Astros for Corey Lee. For the Astros, this really kind of deepens their bullpen. Their bullpen has really had a lot of innings come out of it the last 3-4 months anyway to start the season. So they really need to get some more experience back in that bullpen. They were starting to show a little bit of regression because of all the innings they've had to carry for that Astros organization. The starting pitching issues that they had earlier in the season were really weighing down that bullpen. So if they're able to add one more starter, they're in there for Verlander, they're in there for Stroman, they're in there for Cease. They're definitely looking at some starters. They're in there for Michael Lorenzen as well. But this move does lengthen out that bullpen just a little bit to give some guys a day off here and there when they absolutely need it. So Houston Astros did a good job bringing in a good, solid bullpen piece in Graveman, but there's more work to do, most importantly, on that starting pitching staff, and we'll see who they ultimately get. Right now, it's kind of a battle of wills, if you will, between the Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros when it comes to Justin Verlander. Now, this offseason, Justin Verlander wanted nothing to do with the Texas Rangers, literally told the front office of the Texas Rangers that, hey, I just don't think you're going to be competitive. Well, we're halfway through the season. Texas still sits on top in the AL West, and maybe things have changed. Maybe Justin Verlander says, hey, things haven't exactly gone great with the Mets, the team I thought would be in contention. They obviously are not. Meanwhile, the Rangers, a team I didn't even give a second glance to, is in first place in a very good American League West. So we'll see what happens. Maybe he's still a little sour on how things ended with the Houston Astros, especially with the owner Jim Crane. That's why you got to be careful with how you handle your players. Jim Crane fired his general manager, didn't renew the contract of his general manager anyway, and kind of operated as the GM of the team for a period of time before ultimately hiring one. He let Justin Verlander know essentially that he didn't want to bring him back at that cost. His cap for Justin Verlander was $25 million. Now, if the Mets are willing to eat a significant portion of his salary, which I think they will, if they're able to get premium prospects back in return, then he might be able to go back to the Houston Astros, at least at a price point the Astros might be more palatable to them. The question will be, is Justin Verlander going to waive his no trade to go back to a team that, we'll put it this way, did him dirty? We'll put it that way. Now, he had a great year with the Houston Astros last year, won the Cy Young, all those kinds of things, but I think how things ended, especially with the owner and him specifically, I think that's going to leave a sour pill for him to have to swallow in order to go back to Houston. So it might be more of a 50-50 race than you would have thought, but the Rangers absolutely need a frontline starting pitcher. If they're able to get a guy like Justin Verlander, that sets up their rotation the way they had envisioned it to start the season. Jacob deGrom was supposed to be their number one starter this season, and obviously he is out the remainder of the season. But getting him to be their lead horse allows Eovaldi to slide to the 2, allows either Perez or Gray to slide to the 3, or Dunning, and then allows the rest of that rotation just to slide into place. So we'll see what happens here at the deadline. It's going to be very crazy on both sides. The American League and National League, we're going to see a ton of buying out there. There's only a few sellers, so we're going to see a little bit higher prices than I think we would have, especially with the Angels deciding to buy. The question will be, do teams like the San Diego Padres decide to sell here at the deadline? Pieces like Josh Hader and Blake Snell. Blake Snell would probably be the top starting pitcher on the market right now. I still think there's an outside possibility that a guy like Dylan Cease could be moved if the right offer is made. I don't think it will. I'd put that chance of a trade less than Nolan Arenado at this point. And then as far as the Corbin Burnes trade, I think there could be a trade like that looming for the Milwaukee Brewers, where Josh Hader was traded literally out of nowhere last year after years of speculation that he would be. Everybody thought he was finally going to stay the remainder of his deal, and boom, he was traded, and not for that much, honestly. So it was a little bit of a surprise move type, or the surprising type of trade for the Milwaukee Brewers. They got a lot of major league talent back, and that was part of the reason why the return was a little bit less, because they wanted major league ready players to help them to continue their push for a postseason run. A trade for Corbin Burnes, I think, is going to have more impact, obviously. They're going to get better prospects back in return, maybe a major league piece or two that's already ready at the major league level. But I think there's an outside chance we see a surprise trade centered around Corbin Burnes. Right now, I think he's probably going to be the NL Cy Young this year if he keeps pitching the way he has since the All-Star break ended. And we'll see, what the Brewers' decision is as far as their future. The reason why I mentioned Corbin Burnes as a trade possibility, in case you guys are new here, is Corbin Burnes, Willy Adames, Woodruff as well in that starting rotation are all going to be free agents, not after this year, but after next. They do not have the money to be able to re-sign all three and pay Christian Yelich. So Christian Yelich, who's having a decent year this year, kind of a bounce-back year of sorts for him, maybe they're able to offload his contract and save a little bit of money. Maybe then they could sign all three guys, but that's a really tough road for them to go. You also have to take into consideration Corbin Burnes' relationship with the team was soured during the arbitration process this winter. So we'll see if a long-term deal is ultimately going to happen between Burnes and the team, especially after how things ended during that arbitration hearing. So appreciate you guys joining us here tonight. Make sure you hit the like button on the video. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. The Reds have decided to extend their manager 3 years. Not surprising, considering the jump starts to their season they've had with Elly De La Cruz coming up. I thought maybe after seeing how this team would go, maybe they'd give him just a 2-year extension. 3 years seems a little bit long, but maybe that's just the price of poker, I suppose, for managing the Cincinnati Reds for all those difficult years. You got to give him a little bit more leash, I suppose. But I think a manager with better experience, something like that, some more playoff experience, might ultimately be what this team needs in the long run. But for right now, David Bell seems to be working this team just right. I don't think he's going to finish out that 3-year extension with the Reds, though. I'd probably put it at 2 years after this season. And if they're in the World Series or contending, that kind of a thing, then maybe David Bell sticks around. But I think they're eventually going to go to a skipper with more postseason experience at some point if this team continues to track the way they currently look to be on that road towards. Other headlines from around Major League Baseball is that Jonah Heim is going to miss at least 2 to 3 weeks for the Texas Rangers. He strained his wrist in a really hard swing that he had in Houston on Wednesday. Really dynamic game that was. If you guys want to watch it back, I strongly recommend it. It was a great great game to watch, no matter what side of the fence you're on. Just really back and forth in the first few couple of innings, and then it was an absolute rout after that. But all the drama in the first 3 innings was fantastic to watch. You guys, highly recommend you guys watching that one. It was fantastic. But for the Rangers, Jonah Heim goes out, all-star catcher for the American League this year. His presence will certainly be missed. The thing for Jonah Heim is you got to wonder if there's going to be surgery on the horizon for him as well. They're going to try to rest it and see if they can let that strain heal on its own. But if he's going to need surgery after that 3-week time frame, then he's probably not going to be able to get back for the season. So at that point, you got to wonder, do you sit there with a catching situation around Mitch Garver, Sam Huff, Sandy Leon, or do you go out there at the trade deadline and go out there and make an addition? So I guess in looking at the situation for the Rangers, you got to hope for the best with Jonah Heim, but you also thank your lucky stars that this happened before the trade deadline. That way, at least you can get some information on the injury and figure out what you want to do as far as making an addition. But Jonah Heim will certainly be missed by the Texas Rangers. Really kind of had a big step forward this year as far as offensively. He doesn't look nearly as worn down as he did last year in the second half of the season. And sure, it's still a little bit early, but I think this 2 to 3 week time frame, if he heals up just fine, this might be just what the doctor ordered to get Jonah Heim kind of that second wind going into the final weeks of the season. So Rangers will miss Jonah Heim. We'll see if they decide to add a catcher here at the deadline. Maybe if they add one of those bullpen pieces, they can steal a backup catcher from one of these other teams, somebody with more Major League experience than Sam Huff. But we saw Sam Huff crank one out of the ballpark against Houston the other day, and they've got a veteran on the in the minors already in Sandy Leon that they can turn to if necessary. So let us know in the comments section what you guys are looking forward to here at the trade deadline. Which trade do you think was the best one so far? We've seen several of them now. For my money, I would probably say the Angels with their decision to go ahead and buy right now here at the deadline. I still think it was the wrong decision overall to not trade Shohei Ohtani, but given the set of circumstances the GM had, that he wasn't able to convince the GM to go ahead and trade Shohei Ohtani, he went ahead and traded his second and third best prospects for one of the better starting pitchers here on the market in Lucas Giolito and for Ronaldo Lopez. So for me, the two additions there kind of filled two of the biggest holes on that team. I still think they could use one more pitching piece and maybe a lineup piece, but right now I really like the way the Angels are at least set up to try to make a wild card run. Welcome back, Willard. You heard Houston is the favorite team to get Bellinger. I'm not sure the Cubs are going to trade Bellinger at this point. They're 3.5 back right now, the wild card. Their team certainly has a lot of momentum right now, and I think they'd still be wise to go out there and make a move to add some pieces for their future. But Cody Bellinger is just a dynamic player on the Cubs roster this season, and I just don't see them making the decision to move him, especially when they're in the hunt to not only win a wild card spot, but could even win the division if they keep on this impressive hot streak that they're riding right now. As for Marcus Stroman, same thing with Cody Bellinger. I think those two pieces are really valuable on the trade market. You might be able to get some nice pieces back for them, but at this point, I think the way their record sits in the win-loss column, I don't think that's going to happen. Let me go ahead and flip over to the standings for you guys so you guys can check out where everybody is. Let's look at the National League side of it more than anything else, since we're talking about the Cubs. Cubs right now sit 4 games out. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They've got a 6-game winning streak. They're playing St. Louis right now. And just look at the wild card picture on the NL side. I mean, it's all pretty much a complete logjam between the Giants, the Phillies, the Reds, the Marlins, and the Diamondbacks. Then you got a little bit of a gap there between the Cubs and them. And then you get to the Mets and Padres. Mets have already decided to start selling here at the deadline. They traded David Robertson. They're going to trade some more pieces. Sounds like Justin Verlander might waive his no trade to get something done. There might even be a trade around Max Scherzer as well, who pitched well today. Welcome back, Sub-Zero. Yankees do need to get going, I agree. I don't know. I know you're trying to get Roberts Jr. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think he'd be a great get for any team out there. I just don't think the Astros have the pieces to be able to make that type of a trade without giving up major league talent in return. They don't have the guys in the minor leagues to be able to get that type of trade done right now. And it's going to take some major league talent for the Astros to be able to make that type of a move. Other teams out there have the prospect depth that would be able to put a better offer on the table for him. The Rangers, the Dodgers. There's a number of teams out there that could put a better package together for him than the Houston Astros, but we shall see. On the American League side, a lot of talk around the LA Angels the last week anyway with Shohei Ohtani. They're 8-2 in their last 10. Part of the reason why they decided to go ahead and make a run here at the wild card spot. They are 4-0 in their last 4, obviously. They're playing Toronto right now. Really big game for them because this is one of the teams they're chasing in the wild card. The Toronto Blue Jays right now sit at 57-46, 11 games over 500, and they're 3 ahead of the Angels in the wild card spot. So say the Angels go into Toronto and sweep. If they get that done, they're going to be right there for a wild card spot, and it's going to be anybody's contest between Toronto, Boston, New York, and LA in order to win one of those wild card spots. I don't count Seattle as a contender on the American League side. I just don't think they have the horses to be able to get that something like that done, even though they're still playing winning baseball as of right now. I just think the injuries are just too big for them to overcome in the long run, and especially with other teams adding here at the deadline. Any additions that I think Seattle would make here at the deadline, I don't think are going to be as impactful as the ones the Rangers, the Astros, teams like that are going to make. Looks like Minnesota's starting to cough this one up against the Kansas City Royals. It's now 3-2. Base hit there by Melendez, giving the Royals the lead in the bottom of the sixth. The one team this far down in the standings that has a shot to make a postseason run is the Guardians. A little perplexed by the trade for Ahmed Rosario for Noah Syndergaard. Sure that Guardians need some innings, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem like the right fit for the team. I don't think he's going to stay there long term. Could he give them a little bit of a lightning in a bottle kind of effect, I suppose, but especially for a team that absolutely needs some starting pitching, I guess that's the best they could do for Ahmed Rosario instead of going the prospect route. I wonder if this means other pieces from the Guardians might be traded in similar type of fashion to try to maximize their value before they hit free agency or before they start to lose some other value as well. So, on the outside chance that they might trade one of their best bullpen pieces in Class A, I'm sure they'd get a pretty penny for him, even in a down year. But very, very interesting trade for the Ahmed Rosario and Noah Syndergaard trade. Very curious to see what the Guardians ultimately do the rest of the way. Yankees need to win this series. I agree. The Yankees are in a tough spot because if they lose that series, say they get swept against Baltimore, they're looking up at all of those teams in the wild card race. They're looking up at Toronto. They're looking up at Boston. They then would be looking up at the Angels as well, and I don't think they would be able to overcome it. Welcome in Mike Lowe. If Justin Verlander is dealt tonight to keep his rotation spot Sunday for a new team. You think he's going to get dealt tonight? I was going to say either tonight or tomorrow, just because of, that's the type of trade that's going to take some maneuvering as far as, figuring out with the, luxury tax implications, those types of things. But Justin Verlander, got to get him to waive that no trade, got to get the medicals done. But I think Justin Verlander, if he's going to be moved, will be done either today, tomorrow, at the very latest Sunday. Jordan Romano came out of the game tonight. Jays already needed some bullpen help. I agree. Rangers announced they have acquired catcher Kevin Plawecki for cash in a minor trade with the San Diego Padres. What a surprising trade that one is. Not really, actually. Plawecki actually was acquired by the Rangers late last year, on waivers anyway, from the Boston Red Sox. And he actually played in a game or two for the Rangers at the end of the year last year. This is kind of a good move for the Rangers. Allows them to get some catching depth here, somebody they're familiar with. And it only costs them cash. And they're already in San Diego, so he's already going to be in the building. Or at least close by to the building, to where they can call him up immediately once he arrives at the ballpark. So, good trade for the Rangers. They just need some depth at least until the decision on Jonah Heim is made. But it sounds like Mitch Garver's probably going to handle the majority of the catching duty. And then you're going to be left with a combination of Huff, Leone, and Plawecki for that backup spot. Checking in on some of these other options here. Another veteran reliever was just called up to the majors for the White Sox. Brian Shaw. Very interesting. Mainly because they have had already so many losses out of that bullpen, yet they still have tons of relief options with major league experience on this roster. Another one I'm very curious about for the White Sox is Keenan Middleton. He had a tough outing the other night, but so far this year, he's been very good for them. And I could see him being moved here at the deadline, kind of a middle relief type of guy. For a playoff series, I think he'd be great in that 5th, 6th inning whenever your starter gets bounced early or gets into a jam in, 2 outs in the 5th. You need to bring in a reliever to shut the door right there. Middleton would be a great pitcher for that, and then be able to pitch the 6th as well. Bummer is in a very similar position as well, but we shall see who ultimately will be left in that White Sox bullpen. I think they still got a few more pieces that they could move out of that pen besides just Middleton and Bummer. There's the Plawecki trade that you mentioned, John. What's the Yankees' delay? Weather, from what I heard. I saw a picture of the stadium before the game. It looked like something out of a comic book or a cartoon or something, how dark that sky was above the stadium. It was otherworldly. Checking on some of these other notes here. Good note here for the Blue Jays is that they're going to activate Ryu. It's going to take him some time to get some of that arm strength built back up. So I know you Blue Jays fans out there, Mark, I know you're a Blue Jays fan. It's going to take him some time to get back into the swing of things, but I think he could be one of your regular starters, especially when you get down to a postseason series. I think he's probably going to be your Game 3, Game 4 starter once he's fully back and got some innings under his belt, if he gets back to the same Ryu that we're used to seeing in the past. But we shall see what happens. Remember, he signed that 4-year, $80 million deal to go to the Blue Jays back in the COVID year of 2020. Had Tommy John, and hopefully things will work out. Uh-oh, Royals pitcher just got injured. Looks like he pulled a calf or strained it or something when he stomped on... Oh, he turned his ankle a little bit, it looks like, when he stepped on first base to get the out for Julian. Royals, of course, a selling team at the deadline this year. They don't have a whole lot to sell. There were some rumors about Salvador Perez possibly going to a team like the Padres to give him some depth at catcher. Now with Jonah Heim going on the IL for the Rangers, maybe if they decide he needs to go on the IL and have surgery, maybe they could go towards Salvador Perez. They already had discussions around Aroldis Chapman, so they could just resume some of the prospect talks they had then. But the other rumors were that he could go to the Miami Marlins, where he actually has an off-season home and might be able to shepherd that young team through a postseason series, give them a little bit more offense out of that catcher spot, since they have one of the league's worst production at the catcher spot so far this year. We'll get to some trade discussions here in just a moment. So if you guys want to send us your ideas, what teams you want, what teams you're rooting for, hoping you're going to get, all those kinds of things. If you're a Dodgers fan, do you think you're going to get Arenado? If you're a Yankees fan, do you think you're going to go out there and add a guy like Dylan Carlson? Cardinals have all kinds of pieces that they could move. Where does Flaherty go? Montgomery? Does Dylan Cease ultimately get traded? Where does Verlander go? Does Scherzer get moved as well, even though he's having a down year and looks like his velocity's lost a little bit of action? He's also lost some movement on some of his pitches this year. Real signs of regression for Max Scherzer for the first time in his career, at least to the outside observer. Told you guys over the last year or so that Max Scherzer looked like the guy who was running out of gas at the very end of the season the last 2 years. How often before 2021 would we say that we had seen Max Scherzer decline to take the ball at any point, at any game in his entire career, ever? And we saw him do that in Game 6 in a very important game against the Atlanta Braves. He instead said, hey, Walker Buehler, take it. And they subsequently lost the game. The next year, played for the Mets last year, and we saw how he got blown up anyway by the San Diego Padres before the game. If you looked at his bullpen, it looked like he might have tweaked something there. If you look at some of the video from that game. And I just wonder if Scherzer's just starting to wear down once you get to the final months of the season. He did miss some time earlier this year, so maybe he's got a little bit more gas left in the tank than he did, say, at any point over the last couple of years. But his velocity started to lose something. We shall see what happens. Welcome in, Bill. Would hurt to see Salvi go, but if the Royals could get a nice return, we all get to see him do his thing in the playoffs again, I'd be down. Well, you're not going to get a big return. I think you might get, say, like a top 15 and then maybe a top 25 prospect in return for Salvador Perez. Right now, that seems to be the going rate for that level of player right now. Salvador Perez is not the same Salvador Perez who led the Kansas City Royals back in 2015. You're not going to pay for past production for that. I mean, sure, the Royals would like to get something just because of how important he is to that organization, but I think this decision is purely going to come down to, does Salvador Perez want to play on a playoff team? If the answer is yes, it's whatever the market rate is for him out there. So that would be teams that are in the playoff running. Teams like probably the Dodgers, the Rangers, the Astros. Teams like that really need some catching, or that are really having a good World Series chance. I don't think he's going to go to a team that necessarily isn't going to be competing for a title. Welcome back, Mr. Shin. Yankees starting at 9:30. It was rain. Yep, we saw the picture before the game. Looked absolutely otherworldly above the stadium. But Yankees and Rangers both chasing Jordan Hicks. Yes, Yankees I think do need to add a bullpen piece. I think pretty much every team that's in contention for a wild card or even the division title needs some bullpen help. But Jordan Hicks I think would be a great complement for both of those teams. In the case of the Yankees versus the Rangers, I would say the Rangers probably have the leg up there because of Mike Maddox working with him with the St. Louis Cardinals last year. Already has a rapport with him, and if he signs off on it, I think see why that Chris Young, the general manager for the Texas Rangers, takes a lot of weight into what the management group of the Rangers has to say. Whether Bruce Bochy is a fan of the guy, we saw that with the Aroldis Chapman move. Bochy said, "Hey, I want him on this team," and that's what happened. We saw that, I think we could see something like that again here with Jordan Hicks. And because it is a rental situation, I think the price could be a little bit lower than a guy like, say, David Bednar, for instance. But might even be lower than a rental like Josh Hader. But could be a nice trade there for the Rangers. For the Yankees, they obviously need something to get going as far as the team itself. Aaron Judge coming back, I mean, that's going to give him a nice boon. But he's literally going to have to throw him on his back in order to get them a wild card spot. It's a tough year for the Yankees just because they've missed so much time due to injury for Rodon and Judge. I just wonder if they ultimately miss the postseason. I mean, injuries at a certain point just take too much out of your team, and that could be what happened to this year's Yankees. Maybe next year Rodon's fully healthy and you have a great 1-2 at the top and they win the division. All those types of things are very possible next year if they're healthy, but so far this year just hasn't worked out so well. Matt Blake loves working high-velocity guys, too. It's whoever gets him first. Yeah. Love the Graveman trade for the Astros. I agree. Gives them exactly what they need for that bullpen, somebody they're familiar with, somebody who they can use in high-leverage spots as well. Plus, it gives them some insurance in case they can't re-sign all their bullpen pieces after this year. But just speaking about this year, their bullpen's been overworked in Houston, and Graveman is a nice addition to allow those guys to get some rest when they need it, to not have to keep using the same 3-4 guys every single time they're in the lead in any game, which they're the Astros. They're a good team. They're going to be in the lead in a lot of games, and they've really been riding that bullpen pretty hard for the first half of the year. They need to get somebody else in there to kind of give them a little bit of air, and they need to get somebody in that starting rotation so they don't have to go so early to that bullpen every single game. So really like the trade for the Astros. Didn't cost him a whole lot either. And as I mentioned, he's got another year left of control after this. So they've got, 3-4 relievers out of that bullpen, high leverage guys that are going to be on the free agent market if they don't re-sign those guys or extend them before the end of the year. And Graven gives them at least some insurance in case they don't bring all of them back. We mentioned the Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly trade earlier. This one, I think, for the Dodgers could work very well from a bullpen perspective, primarily because Joe Kelly is going to be another arm that they can use in a high-leverage spot. For the rotation, I think this is more about health than anything else. Lance Lynn, I think, will have a very nice bounce back within the Dodgers organization. Do I think he'll get back to being, Cy Young candidate that he was with the Texas Rangers? Not quite. He has one of the league's worst ERA this year. He's given up 28 home runs. Has not looked good this year. But he did waive his no trade. I think the analytics department for the Dodgers is going to kind of revive him a little bit before he gets to the free agency period. But Lance Lynn should at least give their other starters in that rotation some time off, allow them to skip a start, allow them to be spaced out to a six-man rotation. A lot of different ways that the Dodgers could use Lance Lynn. Rays and Diamondbacks have joined the pursuit. Not so much as join the pursuit. I think the Rays were always looking for bullpen pieces. As far as the Jordan Hicks specifically, I would agree there. We hadn't really heard of either of those teams. I'd heard the Diamondbacks a couple of times earlier, though, before I even heard the Rangers were in on Hicks. But Diamondbacks are looking for some bullpen. They're mainly looking for a starting pitcher, though, so we shall see. Just kind of scrolling through some of these other headlines from today, and then we'll refresh the page. See if anything else is happening. We mentioned that Aaron Judge is back. And we talked a little bit about Justin Verlander possibly waiving his no trade. Max Scherzer also has a no trade, but we talked a lot about how his velocity is down, lost some of his stuff. The Mets also have other pieces they could move. Brooks Raley in the bullpen. They could move Adam Ottavino. Then outfielders like Mark Canha and Tommy Pham are also available for the Mets. Let's go ahead and scroll all the way back up and see if anything else has happened in the last few minutes. I think now with the Jordan Hicks, not getting that extension done as of yet, you're going to see that market really develop over the next 12 to 24 hours. I'm not sure it's going to be 24 hours before he's traded at this point. I think a trade will probably happen within the next 24 hours for Jordan Hicks. Seems like his market is starting to move. And these relievers, at least we're starting to see a set price for what these relievers could cost. Ronaldo Lopez, Graveman, a couple of the White Sox guys already being traded so far. You're starting to see the industry set the price for what it is going to be for a relief pitcher. David Robertson's price that he went for, a couple of guys in rookie ball, but higher value targets from that level. Are there any chances for Clevenger for the White Sox? He's in the final, or he only signed a one-year deal for the White Sox. I think there is a chance for him to be moved if prices stay high for some starting pitching. He could be another guy that could get moved. There's a lot of teams out there that are looking for some starting pitching, and not a lot of teams have starting pitching to trade. The White Sox have guys that should have been good, that should have led them to having a nice year for the White Sox, but for the second year in a row, it just hasn't worked out that way for whatever reason. Injuries, poor performance, regression, whatever you want to put your finger at. Clevenger is going to be one of the pieces that could be sought after as a starting pitching candidate. Tigers have a few starters that they could move, but Eduardo Rodriguez is probably going to be the best of that group there. Lorenzen could be the next step down from there as well. Appreciate you guys joining us. Got about 22 of you guys right now with us. If you guys want to hit that like button, it really does help us out. Appreciate that. If you're new to us, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It helps as well. Follow us on Twitter at UpsideSN and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. Alrighty, let's have some fun, shall we? Let's make some trades. Did a little bit of this last night, but kind of had to get going anyway. Had a long day at work the last couple of days, so let's have some fun this evening. Let's do some regular two-team trades. Let's start with a selling team, shall we? Let's go to a team like... Let's do the Mets. They have a lot of different types of pieces. They could form a lot of different types of trades. Let's do the Astros, for instance. Now, Verlander would be the piece that the Astros would want. The question is, how much would they have to eat? Pardon me. Anyway, let's go all the way down here. Let's go ahead and include, say, $30 million in cash to go to the Astros. Reason why I say $30 million is because he has another year left after this deal, or after this year anyway. So they're going to need some money to be able to take on that contract of Verlander. Now the question is, would Verlander accept a trade back to Houston? If he's willing to, what would it cost? Well, the Mets are going to have to eat a lot of that value. Welcome in, Kyle. Come on, Phillies. Okay. We'll do a Phillies one for you here in just a minute. What would the Astros have to give up to get that value there? Obviously, they're not going to trade from the top end of their current team anyway. So let's look at some of their prospects that they could move. Let's say the Mets go ahead and get Gilbert, their top prospect, and Baez is the other one I would want right now, tearing the cover off the ball, as we've mentioned a few times now. And let's say they get somebody to go into the rotation for them for the remainder of the year. Let's say they get Urquidy, they get some control there with it as well. Overall, not a bad trade. Couple of outfielders, a pitcher to take Verlander's spot in the rotation. Is this enough to get Verlander from the Mets? I don't know. Is this enough for the Astros to be willing to take back Verlander? I don't know. Is this enough for is this the right destination for Verlander to even waive his no trade? Remains to be seen if he's able to mend fences on his behalf or on the ownership side. Who's going to blink first? Does Crane apologize to Verlander for the comments he said in the media, etc., for setting that price for those types of situations that he created for himself anyway? Having a GM, I think, would have made things a lot easier for this situation to be resolved. But that's not a bad trade for Verlander. Now, Kyle, I said we were going to do a Phillies one, so let's go ahead and clear it up. And let's do a Phillies trade. I keep hearing that they need like a corner bat on the market right now. I still think they could use at least one more pitcher as well. So let's look and see what they could use. Now, the Cardinals are a team that has a little bit of everything for you guys. So let's start with them. What could they glean from this team? Let's go down to kind of the lower end because you don't really want to trade too much here. So maybe a guy like O'Neill could be that corner bat for you. O'Neill, I don't think ultimately gets moved, but if you're willing to go out there and make this type of thing happen, could be the right piece for you. Maybe the Phillies go out there and say, hey, we want a starting pitcher, we'll take Montgomery. The biggest piece that they would really like is Nolan Arenado. I don't think he'd waive his no trade to go to Philadelphia, though, so I think that discussion is moot. So we'll just leave it to O'Neill for right now. What would it take for the Phillies to get a guy like Tyler O'Neill? It's not going to cost you some of your top prospects, but a piece they got from the Rangers in a trade a couple of years ago would be Hans Kraus. I think he might be a piece that could go to the Cardinals and see if they could give him some juice. But I think that they're going to want a little bit more than that. So looking at their prospect pool, let's go with some young guys. 18-year-old shortstop. They got a shortstop that's coming through the minors right now. Let's see. They got a pitching prospect. A little older, though. Let's go ahead and throw the 18-year-old in there. You never know what's going to happen. And then we'll throw one more pitching prospect in there. Not a bad trade overall. O'Neill gets a fresh start with a new team. Looks like he's really starting to come through in those big, high-leverage situations right now for the Cardinals, delivering big, bases loaded doubles with 2 outs late in games lately. Saw him hit another one against the Cubs the other day. This is a type of trade that could really help that Phillies offense a little bit. But as I said, I still think they need some more pitching. So if I'm the Phillies, yes, this would be a great fit for me, but I'd also want to add to that bullpen as well. That article did not mention Yankees. They are in too. Yes, they are. All right, so we did a Phillies one. Let's go ahead and clear this off. Let's do a Yankees one. Got a few Yankees fans in here. Yankees have been connected with any number of St. Louis Cardinals. They connected on a trade last year as well. It would be easy to make another one there, but let's make a more interesting one. Let's go to the San Diego Padres. Let's say Cashman says, enough. We want to put our foot in the ground and really make make a dent this season. We want to, really try to get a wild card spot. We're not punting on this year. We're the New York Yankees. I don't care if all the other teams have the momentum. We're the Yankees. We got Aaron Judge, the best player in the world, etc. Well, you're going to have to pay to play. So, what exactly could they go out there and get? Let's see. They do need some bullpen. Josh Hader would be a piece there. So let's go ahead and say Josh Hader first. Lugo's another piece that could be had here. Might be a good piece for them for either a spot start or a bullpen piece, long relief, that kind of a thing. Trying to find Blake Snell. I'm wondering. There he is. Blake Snell. Let's say you do all three. Yes, he does. His moves have not worked out the last couple of years, though. But I think re-signing Aaron Judge really does give him some grace anyway for at least the next year or so. But if they miss the postseason this year, and then they followed up with another rough year next year, which could happen, the Rays aren't getting any worse. The Orioles are only going to get better. Toronto's going to be about as good as they were this year. Maybe a hair better, maybe a hair worse. Boston's going to be about what they were this year, maybe a little worse. Yankees, they're going to have to make some changes on that roster if they really want to become the evil empire Yankees of old. But just looking at this type of value here, 17.7, that's not something, to sneeze at, but it's not something the Yankees can't come up with either. So let's look at what the Yankees could include here. Padres obviously are still trying to at least thread the needle between not giving up on the season, but they also, realize, hey, they're sitting, 6.5 games right now of a wild card spot. This year is just not their year, at least it seems like. They're not going to get, Dominguez from the Yankees. That's not going to happen. But the Yankees seem to like to go the, multiple, grab bag full of prospects option rather than giving up a bunch of pieces or giving up top-end pieces. So let's start a little bit lower. Let's say they want to go young, so they bring in Arias. It's kind of the headliner piece. And then they go really young. They go ahead and throw in the 18-year-old outfielder, 19-year-old starter, another 18-year-old shortstop, and then let's see what happens. Grab bag full of prospects, all young guys that are several years away, for basically the top 3 trade pieces here at the deadline for the Padres outside of Juan Soto. This is a type of trade for the Yankees that could really get them going in the right direction, at least on the pitching side, and they'd still have their top flight prospects to be able to trade for another hitter if they decide to, or go out there and get a Nolan Arenado if they're able to pry him away from the Cardinals. I don't think that would happen, but something like this would really be a nice boon for the Yankees here at the deadline, especially with the Angels coming on strong. The Astros are going to add a piece, the Rangers are going to add a piece, the Rays are going to add, Orioles are going to add, and so basically I think they're going to be fighting it out between the Angels, Blue Jays, Red Sox, and Yankees for that final wild card spot, and this would be the type of trade that would at least give them a legitimate chance at it. Snell so far has been the best pitcher on the National League side all year, and we'll see what happens. I still think Corbin Burns probably wins the NL Cy Young just because of how he's been performing lately. The walks do worry me for Snell, and the length of his outings do as well. Burns is starting to throw a little bit deeper into games the last year or two, so a little bit of a change for him. But Josh Hader going to the Yankees, he would probably take their spot as probably the 8th inning or 9th inning guy for them. But as I mentioned, this gives them a lot of depth in that starting rotation should Rodon not be able to figure it out if he has to go back on the IL. This would be the type of trade the Yankees would be able to, at least stay above water if they suffer yet another injury the rest of the way. So, not a bad trade for both sides. But let's go ahead and clear this one off. Let's have a little bit more fun. Let's see. Let's do a White Sox trade once again. The White Sox team seem to be willing to trade just about everybody on their roster outside of Jimenez, Robert, and Cease. Let's go ahead and do a trade for Bummer here. Let's go ahead and say to a bullpen team, or a team that needs bullpen help, like the Diamondbacks. So there's Bummer there. Gives them a guy that they can put in high leverage spots, somebody who's been successful so far this year. His ERA looks a little bit higher than what you might expect for a trade deadline acquisition, but it's only because of 3 absolutely horrible outings. The rest of his pitching performances this year have been gold. So the Diamondbacks would get somebody who's at least had very consistent success with 1 or 2 really bad outings in between. But what would it ultimately cost? It's not going to cost any of these top pieces for the Diamondbacks, which is the best thing for them. They don't have to give up a whole lot. They could go all the way down to the lower end of their farm system and say, hey, we'll go ahead and trade a first base prospect. We'll go ahead and trade an outfield prospect because I have a lot of outfielders right now as well. And just looking at what that already looks like, right now we're looking at 11.7 versus 8.8. Pretty good trade there. Couple of lower end prospects, not the top guys from the Diamondbacks organization. Gives the White Sox some versatility from the packages that they've gotten already. They got a catcher in one trade. They got some pitching in another. And this would add some more talent to their prospect base for just 1 bullpen arm. So not a bad addition. Diamondbacks add before the deadline. Satisfies their fan base. I still think they would need probably a starter. Maybe they could include a guy like Clevenger here, a low-cost option as far as additions for their starting rotation. But not a bad trade overall. Let's go ahead and clear this one off. What else could we see here at the deadline? We haven't talked a whole lot about what the Atlanta Braves could do. I think that's mainly because they're just going to tinker around the periphery of their roster. Think of a guy like Adam Duvall, once again going back to the Braves. We talked about that about 3 or 4 times now over the last few days. Seems like something that's just going to happen at this point. I think he'd be a great bat for a lot of these teams that need a corner outfield DH type hitter, and I think that might be what the Red Sox are holding out for. But as far as getting a better offer for him, but I think the Braves are just very comfortable with the player. I think they'll probably ultimately get him back. But teams like the Phillies, the Rangers, the Astros could all use a piece like Adam Duvall on the roster for the remainder of the season. A team like the Dodgers as well would fit. I think they're going to add another corner outfield bat, somebody who could fit in a platoon. The thinking was that Tommy Pham would be that type of player for them. But until it happens, maybe they decide to go with a little bit bigger game and go after Adam Duvall. But he'd be a nice addition for any team here at the deadline. Plays good defense in the outfield as well, so we'll see who he ends up going to. Let's go ahead and do another trade here. Let's go ahead and do those Braves and see what they could add. Let's go ahead and rule out Adam Duvall. What else could they go out there and get? Let's go ahead and do the Padres once again. We'll do a guy like Josh Hader. Now remember, the Braves have done a closer trade with the Padres before, sending Craig Kimbrell to the Padres. Now it'll be the Padres' turn to give the Braves their closer with Josh Hader. So what could they get? Again, his value isn't that high. That's why he's very gettable for these teams. Bob Nightingale reported the other day that teams were getting the impression that Hader was more likely to be moved than Blake Snell was. They were getting the sense that Preller was actually interested in moving him. Not saying that he would do it, but he was at least more willing to discuss that than, say, Blake Snell, more than any other player on his roster. So what would it cost for the Braves to get him? Well, you ain't trading, Ozzie Albies or anything like that. It's not going to cost you a whole heck of a lot. Maybe it could just be a one, prospect type of trade, or maybe a, borderline major league player. So, maybe they decide to go ahead and give up on Vaughn Grissom. I think that value would be a little bit high. So I'd probably go a little bit lower. Maybe they go with Richie, the former first-round pick, give them some real potential there. And maybe another prospect really lower in their system like Shoemake, who really hasn't panned out yet at the major league level, and trade him. So let's look at what that trade would look like. About double the value, at least on this site, for Hader. But I think this is the type of trade that would excite the San Diego Padres enough to say, hey, this trade is actually pretty good and enough to beat all the other offers on the table for Hader. If they made this type of an offer, this might get it done for the San Diego Padres and the Atlanta Braves. But I think there are other trade partners out there that could drive up the price for Hader even more so than what this trade package would include. Richie, I think, is going to have a bright future in Major League Baseball. Shoemake hasn't panned out quite as well as they had thought. and maybe the Padres can get something out of him. But the key piece there for the trade would be Richie for the Padres. Appreciate you guys joining us tonight. About to cross the 1 hour mark here in a few minutes. If you haven't already hit that like button, please do so. It really does help us out. And just to let you guys know, kind of a programming note, we'll be live for you guys all day on Tuesday. So make sure you join us for trade deadline coverage starting around 8:30 in the morning, somewhere around there. And we'll be live all the way through the deadline, probably an hour, hour and a half after the deadline, just in case we get some of those deals that are caught in the process. So the rules of the trade deadline are this. You must have the deals agreed to and the trade call placed before the deadline, which I believe is 6 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, August 1st anyway. So if you're in that queue, if you're waiting to talk to the league, you already have to have your medicals exchanged, the players agreed to, salaries, whatever you decide to include as far as cash, whatever you decide to do. All that has to be agreed to before you get on the trade call with Major League Baseball. If you're still hemming and hawing about medicals, trade's not happening if it doesn't get done before that deadline. Now, the reason why I say it could happen after that is because as long as you have that trade call placed, as long as you're in that queue, Major League Baseball will still accept your call and accept your trade, because at that point, you would have already placed the call to Major League Baseball to get the trade done and basically authorized, if you will. And the Major League Baseball has to approve it, etc. But if they get the trade call in, you can still get your trade done even though you're waiting in line. So every year we see probably about 30, 35, 40 minutes where trade calls are still being taken at the league office. That's why we are going to be live with you guys for probably about an hour, hour and a half afterward. Plus we can break down all the trades that we've seen through this entire deadline season. Welcome back, David. Been a minute. Phillies win again. Biggest rumor of the day. Phillies getting Luis Robert, and Chicago getting Mick Abel and Justin Crawford. I know Dombrowski always likes to go big game hunting. I know they would love a corner bat. Robert certainly would fit that type of role for them. I just don't think the White Sox would do it. Just from my perspective, I think he's got so much value and such a bright future for the White Sox. He's literally one of the few pieces that they can really build around for that organization. Unless this is a true teardown for them, I find it hard to believe that they're going to give up on Robert, even for a package like that, and even if they added more to it. I still find it hard to believe that the White Sox would do it. But as far as biggest rumor of the day, I'll accept that one. But we'll see if we get any other big rumors here as the night kind of winds on. Probably going to call it here in about the next 10-15 minutes. So if you guys want to send your trade ideas to us, be more than happy to kind of flush them out and see if they make sense, if they hold water, if they don't, all those types of things. But appreciate you guys joining us once again. Other programming note for tomorrow. We'll probably start our coverage a little bit earlier tomorrow in the day. Usually we've been starting around 8:30 every night leading up here to the deadline. We'll probably start a little bit earlier, 8, 7:30, somewhere in there Central Time. So make sure you're joining us a little bit earlier. And we might go a little bit later as we'll probably see some of the bigger trades happen between tonight and tomorrow as well. That's part of the reason why I'm probably going to call it here in the next 10 minutes in case we do get one of those big trades. I can make one of those videos for you guys to watch. And then if it's a big enough trade, we'll probably come back live this evening. But we should have some interesting trade talk tomorrow night to discuss. So appreciate you guys for joining us. Again, if you're new here to the Upside, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter at UpsideSN. Follow us on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Let's kind of refresh the page to see if we're getting any other rumors. Jordan Hicks, we talked about a little bit earlier on in the videos that he's very likely to be moved at this point after failing to reach an extension. A couple of the trades we've seen today anyway, Lance Lynn, Joe Kelly go to the Dodgers for a couple of prospects. Kendall Graveman goes from the White Sox to the Astros for Corey Lee. A couple of good trades for some contenders. And now we're starting to see some rumors around the Mets after they decided to sell David Robertson last night to a division rival in the Miami Marlins. How weird is it that we live in a world where the Mets had the biggest payroll in baseball history coming into the season, and could have even been bigger with the addition of Carlos Correa. An addition, by the way, I think really would have gotten that team going and solved some of the issues that they've had so far this year. But the issues for them kind of numerous for that team. The loss of Edwin Diaz, the injury issues, the suspension issue for Scherzer earlier in the year, Verlander out for a month. Senga, in all of this, has been one of the most stable pieces in that entire organization. He was considered one of the most volatile because he had never pitched in the majors. And what a season Kodai Senga has had. He will not be moved at the deadline. I think it's fair to assume he is the new ace of that staff if Verlander is traded. Scherzer really looked like he's lost a step. Senga looks like the number one right now based on how his performance has been so far this year. I think opening day next year, if Scherzer's still there, he might get it just because he's been there a little longer. But based on performance, Kodai Senga should be your game one starter right now for the New York Mets. But how weird is it that we live in a world where a team that had that big of a payroll trades to a team that was considered to be a bottom dweller in that division, team that was going to finish last in the Miami Marlins. Luis Arraez really has boosted that offense, and the surprising thing is they've been doing this without having the dynamic performance of Sandy Alcantara. He's been nothing like what he was last year. We're finally starting to see him come back into his own, so watch out for the Miami Marlins. I know they hit the skids the last couple of weeks anyway out of the All-Star break, but I think they're going to really start to turn things around now that Alcantara seems to be finding that Cy Young form that we saw last year. Other bits that we're seeing around Major League Baseball is that the Padres may do a little bit of selling, but they also could stand pat anyway with Blake Snell and Josh Hader. Juan Soto's been floated out there by A.J. Preller, but everybody kind of realizes that this is just kind of a headline grab for Preller just to see if he gets any bites, see what he could possibly get. You're not trading for Juan Soto, especially after the pieces you gave up last year, just because they're not going to get pieces similar to that for Juan Soto right now. The production isn't there for Juan Soto to justify it, and there's not enough contract length left to give up the haul that the Padres had to give up to get him in the first place. So let us know in the comments section what trades you think you're going to see here ahead of the deadline. Could you see some surprise trades out of nowhere? For instance, do the Cardinals decide, hey, Arenado says he would accept a trade to the Dodgers. I guess he wants out of here. We have a third base prospect in Gorman already ready to take over that position. He's a 30-plus home run guy right now in the majors. His natural position is third base. We're going to move DeYoung anyway. Maybe we even do a package deal, DeYoung and Arenado to the Dodgers. There's a lot of things that they could do, but could we see a trade like that here in the next 48 to 72 hours? I don't think that's going to be a deadline day trade. I think that type of trade is going to have to happen, this weekend. But let us know in the comment section what you guys think is the biggest trade we should see here at the deadline. But as I mentioned, we'll be live for you guys all day on Tuesday. Make sure you join us early. If you have to work that day, go ahead and just turn us on in the background, and we'll keep you guys updated, even though you may not be able to watch, at work or, watch your conventional MLB network. Interesting note there for the playoffs, we just saw the Tampa Bay Rays take a 4-3 lead in the top of the ninth against Houston. Looks like the Angels lose here to the Blue Jays in Game 1 of their series. So the momentum stops there a little bit. Ohtani hit another home run, I believe, today. Number 39, I think he's up to now. In case you guys are wondering, he is going to get a massive payday this offseason. Everybody was speculating about a 10-year, $500 million deal. It very well may still end up being around that number, but you're talking about now a guy taking that next step in that evolution of his career. Kind of becoming that complete, total, dynamic force of nature in an at-bat. Also taking it on the mound as well. A little bit of a scare the other day when he got collided into at first base against the Detroit Tigers. Got ran into on the back of his pitching arm, and he shook it off and was just fine. But one hit, complete game shutout in Game 1 of the doubleheader, and then hit a home run, or a couple of home runs in Game 2. So dynamic day anyway for Shohei Ohtani. But lose today, losing a little bit of that momentum. We'll see if the Angels decide to add here. Remember, they did add Ronaldo Lopez and Lucas Giolito. There was some discussion about them adding Jeimer Candelario from the Washington Nationals. Still think that could happen, but right now the Angels are carrying like 4 third basemen on their roster. We'll see if anything happens there. They might have to clear up a little bit of the logjam. But a name you may have heard of before, obviously, and Mike Moustakas, you may not have realized is actually on that team and has already led some player-only meetings there with the LA Angels. Nice grab for them. Really has kind of helped spur this winning streak that they've been on lately. And we'll see if the Angels can make some noise and make enough noise to get into that final wildcard spot and ultimately make a run into the postseason. Let's go ahead and refresh it one more time before we go ahead and hang it up here. International baseball news, but doesn't look like anything newsworthy is happening as of late. With the Texas Rangers, San Diego Padres playing on the West Coast right now, you could see some headlines pop after those late games. So if you guys are paying attention to your Twitter pages, if you're watching MLBTradeRumors.com, if you're refreshing your page constantly, you might see some news pop after the game if something were to happen. Remember, you see some of those, iconic moments where you remember that player was called out of the game because they realized they had traded him. You remember that with a guy like Wilmer Flores from the New York Mets, literally had tears in his eyes as he was called off the field. Entire stadium gave him a standing ovation as he left the field as he was being traded. So we could see some interesting trades here at the deadline, some moments like that. So keep your eyes peeled for anybody coming out of a game for literally no reason, or what appears to be no reason. We might be seeing a trade. You'd love to see Snell to the Rangers. I would too. I think he'd be a great number 1-2 option along with Eovaldi if they don't end up getting Verlander. Peraza, Dominguez, Severino, Herman to the Padres for Soto and Blake Snell. It's not a horrible trade idea, I'll put it that way. I just don't think the Padres would do something like that just because the value they gave up for Juan Soto. That's not bad as far as a trade value coming back to them, but I'm just not sure that that's enough from a prospect perspective for them to even say yes if they were serious about Juan Soto being traded. So Sub-Zero, not a bad idea, but I just don't think it's enough. But a good start. I think you'd get Preller at least on the phone to hear you and then hang up without even saying a word. But I think that would be kind of at least an opening salvo, if you will. Still think it'd probably cost you at least 2 more top-end prospects. Especially if you're giving up Blake Snell in this deal as well. Because I think Blake Snell on his own would probably get you a better return than being packaged with either Hader or Soto. So I think Hader, if he's traded, would probably go on his own to get a better prospect package or package in general back. Same thing for Snell. And Soto, as I mentioned, I don't think he's going to be moved at all. If they do decide to move him, which I don't think they will, I think the offseason is where something like that happens. The Yankees need a lefty bat. Well, they've been talking about possibly adding Carlson. They've had interest in McMahon from the Rockies. Don't think that happens. Crone, I thought, was going to go to the Brewers. Now he is available for everybody else anyway. Maybe they circle to the Rockies and get a DH-type hitter. The Yankees already have a ton of DHs on their roster, though. So I don't know if that's the right move for them. And it's tough to find a spot for Crone to really go to. Maybe he go to Texas and fill their need at DH. But the Rockies have a number of pieces they can move here at the deadline. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight. We'll refresh one last time for you guys before we hang it up. Really appreciate all the support we've gained. And thank you guys for joining us this evening. We'll be live with you guys again tomorrow. We'll start a little earlier tomorrow, probably in that 7:30, 8 o'clock hour Central Time tomorrow. So make sure you join us earlier. We'll be going a little bit longer tomorrow as well, as we're going to expect some bigger trades happening tomorrow. So make sure you hit that like button on the video, hit that subscribe, turn on your notifications. That way when you go, or that way when we go live, you will be notified. You can even follow us on Twitter. We post when we go live or when we post a video on that as well at Upside SN. Same thing with our Facebook, Upside Sports Network. So thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you guys again tomorrow night. Have a good one.